So we're in the glaze room now, and I'm going to do the first step of glazing the plate. I'm going to use the Chino glaze, and the first step is mixing it up. So just for protocol in this room, the label for each glaze is on the lid and on the side. Now, beginning students sometimes mix the lids up inadvertently because they're just not, acquainted enough to know better. So what you'll want to do to make sure you're using the glaze you want is to look at the label on the side. That's more dependable than the label on the lid. Okay? Just important note. Now I'm going to use this drill and paddle to mix this up, and it's noisy, so I'm going to protect my ears. I've also got this bucket of water that I'm going to use to, once I mix this up, this is going to have glaze on it that I don't want dripping on the floor, so I'm just going to go straight from the glaze bucket into this rinse water. That's a much more efficient way to keep the room clean. So the question I often hear at this point is, Mr. Thiel, how do I know when I've mixed the glaze enough? Well, you can see that it's very homogeneous now. There's no excess water. It's all been mixed together very thoroughly. And that took about a minute or two for that to work completely. And remember, I don't want to be drooling wet glaze on the floor, so I'm just going to go right into this bucket and move it out of the way. That's a very convenient way to take care of that. Now the next thing I'm going to get is a pair of tongs. I'm going to different glazes require different lengths of time to dip. So for instance, a dramatic example of this glaze works better thin. This glaze, cranberry, works better very thick. And so we've even labeled how many counts. This is best for a quick dip, it says so right on the label. This is best for a long dip. You're going to count 1001, 1002, 1003, 1004, 1005 as you hold your project in this glaze. So these are sort of procedures that are actually labeled on the glazes. So I'm going to take the advice of that label and do a really quick dip. I've already put the sealer on the foot. Let's see, this works better if the vertical is on this tongs work better if the vertical is on the underneath and the horizontal is on the inside. Just general practice, they work better. And you want to make sure that the rim of the plate isn't touching the handle of the tongs when you put it in. Now I'm going to wiggle it a little bit so that the glaze gets a chance to drain off. And let's see, it would be a good idea to come over here and wipe off the excess. So now you can see that the porous bisqueware has sucked up the moisture of the glaze, and it's already dry enough that I can touch it. But here where I put the resist material, it's still wet. So sometimes people forget that they need to wipe the residual glaze off of the place where they've put the resist glaze. The resist sealer or wax. If there's still glaze on here when it's put in the kiln, it'll still, the resist will melt away, but the glaze will stay. So you want to make sure that you wipe away any residual glaze before you put it on the. Oh, so now let's have the cameraman follow me to where this. Oh wait, no, I'm doing one. This is step one. So I'm going to put this back down on the table. Now that it's dry enough that I can handle it, I'm going to put that down on the table, and the next step needs to happen once the plate's thirsty again. So what I mean by thirsty is right now there's water in the plate from the glaze. That needs to evaporate some so that the next glaze I put on will grab the porous surface. The tongs leave a little blemish. This would be this right after it's been glazed. This is the best time to massage that down. I'm knocking the glaze off the high parts and dragging it into the recess to eliminate that detail. The glaze, when it melts, will resolve the rest of that. So we've just completed step one. We'll come back to this later for the next step once this plate is thirsty enough to receive the next glaze.
All right, today we're going to talk about using the spray booth and some of the pre-setup. Later in the discussion, Mr. Thiel is actually going to do the spraying demonstration, but we wanted to show you how to set it up first. So there's a banding wheel that we're going to use, and the reason we use this one because it sits up high enough. First I'm going to turn on the light. You can actually, as you're spraying, you can get your hand underneath it and you can turn it as you're spraying, which is very important. You want your piece turning as you're spraying. The second thing that I just did is, of course, we have a little light switch here so you can see what you're doing. This is the spray gun that we're going to be using. This off and on, and this is where you put your glaze inside. And I'll just real quick, this is the air pressure. So I'm going to turn that on. And you want to watch the gauge. So if you're doing delicate spraying, I'm turning this knob backwards. You want it at about 40. If you're just doing a large piece, you can have it up to about 50. The air pressure controls how much glaze comes out the tip of the sprayer. So just a quick, not a lot. If I put it up to 50, a lot more comes out. So you can cover more area with it up high. But again, Mr. Thiel is just going to be doing the edge of the plate, so he wants the pressure much lower, so it's not coming out as fast. When you're not using the gun, you can just hang it right here and let it sit while you're moving your pieces in and out.
So if I put that plate on the banding wheel, it's too narrow. So I'm going to use one of the plastic bats to make it wider. And I'm going to cover it with paper because I'm going to get a lot of extra glaze spray. I've waited long enough for my first glaze to get thirsty enough to receive the next glaze. I'm going to leave the glaze you see exposed here in the center and on the back, and I'm going to apply a different color here on the rim, and the interaction of those two glazes will make a third color. This is one of the things we'll be learning about, is various glaze interactions. So I want to put it on the banding wheel so that it's centered, just like I would if I was trimming it on the wheel. Because just like with the application of resist, I'm going to want the spray to, I want my hand holding the spray to be motionless as I turn the wheel, as I turn the plate. That's going to be a really important thing. Beginners who don't use the banding wheel, they get involved in that very kind of, fussy thing that just doesn't work. The banding wheel is essential to getting the glaze on in a uniform way and an efficient way. Okay, now I'm going to turn on this, the one safety feature here is an exhaust fan that's really noisy, but it's drawing the spray away from you while you're working on it. And it's so noisy that I like to wear ear protection. So before I start spraying, I'm going to mask up and I'm going to turn on this exhaust fan. Combined, there should be no exposure to unwanted glaze in the air. And the exhaust is really noisy, so I'm also going to put earphones on. So I've angled the sprayer out to the edge, so it's just hitting the outer edge, and the purpose of the turntable is to turn the plate so that I can keep my spray container in one place. That's the way I keep a consistent flow. Okay, so one beginner mistake people make when they're using the sprayer is holding it right over the top of their artwork. And what happened, you saw, where it dripped down past where I wanted it. All I need to do is have the sprayer off of this edge so that if it drips down, not on the plate.